Welcome, everybody, to the checklist panel discussion on education on Saturday, the 9th of October, 2021. It's a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to have our guests here. I'm joined by an extremely distinguished panel of persons, of experts in education. And I know it's budget week, and yesterday our political leader gave an explosive response. And we may touch on things in the budget as well, but certainly this is with the school starting this week. That has also been on people's minds and experiences, but it may have been shut out because of all the focus on the budget. So we want to focus on the experiences of the vast number of students, of parents, and educators. And this real crisis situation we're facing right now in the country. And we are joined by an excellent panel. We have Dr. Tim Gopeesingh, the former Minister of Education, who really instituted a whole range of reforms and programs and institutions, and has a whole wealth of experience, not only in education, but in virtually every area of politics. And so we are very, very pleased to have him. And actually leading the discussion will be MP for Tabaquite, Anita Haynes. She is the Shadow Minister of Education as well, and she has a wealth of experience and expertise, and we look forward to her leading the discussion. I will hand over to her after I make the introductions. Our third guest is Mr. Winston Jankie, the former acting principal of Preysal High School. So he will be speaking from a very, very practical, on the ground, administrative point of view. And then from another very, very, very practical, experiential point of view would be two students we have, and glad to have them as part of our discussion, because this affects them and their futures, and we really want to hear what they have to say. They are Preity Ramsarran and Sadah Bandoo, both students of Bishop's Anstey High School in Trin City. I want to welcome all of you, and I will stop talking and hand it over to MP Anita Haynes. MP Haynes.
Thank you very much, Chris. I want to thank you and the team at the checklist for facilitating a very excellent panel. I think one thing that's been left out of discussions on education and the education sector has been the views of the students. A key participant in the education sector, and yet still when decisions are made on their behalf, they are not afforded this space to have their voices heard. And one thing that has always been unique to the United National Congress in a political space it has always been a space where you give a voice to persons who are not ordinarily heard on national platforms. So I want to congratulate your team today. And I would also like to thank each and every one of you who've made the time to join us virtually. We appreciate your time sincerely. I am sure we would have a very productive discussion. Preity, I just want to turn over to you very quickly. You would have recently concluded your CSEC exams, and you would have done so in the context of COVID-19. You would have spent your year leading up to the exam, which is a critical year, in a hybrid learning system, but basically online. Just wanted to touch base with you and get a sense of what was that like, practically speaking, for you as a student, and what was it like taking the exams in that context?
Okay, for me, the switch from traditional school to online learning, it was a bit sudden because I expected to go back out to school, not knowing that the outbreak was so deadly and vicious. But for me, online, it was challenging because we had to deal with connectivity issues, teachers now adapting to this, students now adapting to this. Not everyone will be on, and we missed a lot of work at the start of the switch, and it was kind of hard for us students because we'd have to set up these platforms like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Sometimes Zoom will cut off after a while, and it would be so frustrating for students and teachers. So leading up to the examination now is where some students would have adjusted fully and they would prefer online learning, and they would also have devices. That would be for the students who have devices. But for students who have to borrow devices or go to a lab, it would have been a lot more difficult for them, because I know some in that position. And going up to examinations, I would say it was a lot of rush. It was hectic because compared to traditional school, you'll be able to socialize with your friends, get work from them. As compared to online learning, it's like, can I humbug this person for some like help? It would be kind of tough for some students because they are so introverted, and when you're in school, you kind of have that energy. So I would say it was challenging for a few, and coming up to CSEC examinations, a lot of students, they were unsure about like writing the exams. They weren't confident in doing it because they didn't adapt really good to online learning, and it was frustration for some students. Yeah, it was frustrating. Yeah.
I would imagine it was an extremely isolating experience as well, with you having to be just in your home figuring it out. So I can appreciate that. Sadah, how about you? What was your experience like?
Well, I could be a subject to this matter because I faced a lot of emotional and mental problems because being on a screen whole day, it's hard, for 8 hours sitting. I can't meet my friends. I can't talk to teachers face to face. I really miss the school environment, but I always have a motto. I always say, instead of complaining, take action. So, I found myself making a lot of agendas. I'm a student. I love school, so I attend my classes regularly. I enjoy it to be full. So, I I found myself making a lot of agendas, scheduling how I'm going to do this, how I'm going to make an approach to this, which approach will be the most effective one. Sorry. So you have to take all of these factors into being a student because you have your family life as well. You can't allow the school system to overtake your family life at home. You have to know how you're putting things together. Um, but, but out of everything, my problem was the emotional and mental issue because, again, saying being in front of a screen whole day, it's tough. Some people won't understand because they don't have to go through what we go through. And everything being virtual, it is not like how it would be in physical school. You would have a lot to take into consideration, not being at school, getting the teacher's guidance 24/7 during the school hours. You have to become independent in this environment. And sometimes the teachers are very bombarded with school. You would have to wait long for responses from them. So again, instead of complaining, take action.
Well, so thank you very much, Dr. Gopeesingh. Now, you, as Minister of Education, adopted an approach which I witnessed from the sidelines, which took our idea of people-centered, but you really genuinely put people at the center of the things that you were doing. And one of the things that I recall was an investment in making sure that there were guidance counselors and a counseling space in the school system. In the years since you've left, that has fallen by the wayside. With limited funding going to space. But we could see here today, just discussing it with these students, that had that approach in ensuring the mental health and wellness of students. I mean, you would have also done that by focusing on the curriculum and finding a way to ensure that the curriculum afforded balance between getting your education and living a productive life. What are your views seeing so many good ideas just not be implemented at a time when we need them the most right now?
First of all, thank you, Anita, for the opportunity to be with you on the panel. You are my successor, which is important, and which you're doing a great job representing the views of the students and the teachers and the education sector in Parliament. And you have the government to account for the gross failure in the education system. Well, in 2010, the People's Partnership won the election by virtue of Mrs. Prasad's predecessor. The whole movement forward and her vision for the nation as a whole. And this was shared by the other 4 leaders on the platform and the national population, and she was voted in as Prime Minister because one of the more important areas was the question which you mentioned about people-centered development and human capital development and putting people first. And these were her watchwords to her ministers of government between 2010 and 2015. And you would remember the words, serve the people, serve the people, serve the people. So her vision always at the forefront for human capital development and people-centered development. And in that context, she ensured as Prime Minister then that the largest vote and percentage of vote for the different ministries went to the Ministry of Education, which was shared between Minister Karim and myself. I was taking responsibility up to post-secondary, and Minister Karim took from the tertiary education aspect. And so she had separated the 2 ministries. And immediately as we went in, another important area of her vision was the question of ICT in education. And from day one, she promised the population that she will introduce ICT in education and that there will be 1 laptop per child entering Form 1. And when we won the election in May of 2010, we had just a few months to introduce the ICT program of laptops in schools. Well, it's history now. Mrs. Prasad Bissessar in her administration, in our administration, we were able to deliver about 95,000 laptops to students over a 5-year period, to principals, school supervisors, about 6,000 teachers. And we had over 150 ICT technicians. We had all 134 secondary schools with computer labs ranging from some schools had about 5 computer labs with about 50 computers per lab. I hope the students now probably, well, they wouldn't know what is happening in their schools because they have been away from the school for this year. But if perchance that they're back in school, Bishops East, we hope that you visit the lab. I hope that the lab is still functional, but from our information. And then we had 150 ICT technicians servicing these computer labs. We had over 300 of the primary schools with computer labs as well. And we were moving to make sure that the rest of the primary schools were given enough ICT opportunity with having the labs. We also ensured that all secondary schools had audiovisual rooms with television, radio, interactive whiteboards, and we had trained close to about 6,000 to 7,000 teachers with ICT in education skills. And we were working with UNESCO, and we formalized a program and a policy for ICT in education, so that after a while, with training of the teachers and the students becoming accustomed, they began to give their homework, and the students were able to use the computers at home, interact with the teachers, interact with their colleagues, as the 2 students were saying, they feel lonely at times. And this facilitated even the families of the students We believe that over 300,000 citizens of Trinidad and Tobago became computer literate as a result of their children bringing these computers home. So the home lessons were being done, the teachers set their programs of study on the computers, and this was working remarkably well. Unfortunately, when Dr. Rowley's administration took office in 2015, we saw a swift and precipitous reversal of all the gains we had made in education. And it is interesting to see that in 2021 now, the PNM government, Dr. Rowley's government, is now seeing it fit 6 years later to talk about ICT in education, and it's still only old talk. Because when this pandemic started I would say in January 2020, when we raised the first issue in Parliament and wanted a debate in it. But Rowley and they took it up in March 2020 when it was two months late already and they were ill prepared. They found themselves in the situation where students had to stay home now and they didn't know what to do. And the two former ministers, Minister Garcia and his colleague, were unable to put into place anything for the students. We had left 2 platforms, ICT platforms, where we were going to launch the e-textbooks in maths and English when the election was basically taken away from us in 2015. And so we had already made plans for e-textbooks in maths and English. And Mrs. Bisesa had also promised that the primary school students will be given tablets, which were not costly. And so if they had continued for the 5 years subsequent to us leaving or having been removed from office, we would have had approximately another 90 to 95 students who would have had their laptops. Now, they took 1 year at least to determine how many students were without ICT devices, 1 year. And that could have been done in 1 month's time because you have 17 secondary school principals. The principal from Preysal is there now, and he will relate to you some of the issues. But we have a number of principal 1s and school supervisors 1 and 2 and 3. And with their principals of these 485 primary schools and 134 secondary schools, they could have gotten the information as to how many students were without devices, how many students lacked connectivity at their homes, how many teachers were without devices, and how many teachers lacked connectivity at home. It took them 1 year to understand and appreciate that 70,000 students, which is an understatement, is much more, were without ICT devices. And then they began to beg the national community, the business community, to provide ICT devices for students. You could imagine that a laptop was about 2,000 when we demitted office in 2015. It would have been probably close to about 1,800 for a laptop. If you had to buy 70,000 laptops, that would have been about 126 million. They were not spending money on any school feeding program, which was about 230 million per year. So they could have utilized that money to buy the laptops. And still, even today, there are 40,000 students without laptops. They said they have purchased 20,000. I don't believe they have even distributed it. How many of the teachers were trained in ICT? We had trained about 6,000. They stopped the training over the last 6 years. So they have found themselves in major difficulty. But I can expand on that. We want to hear from the principal and the 2 other students.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, Dr. Gopeesingh, you were saying now that it took them a year to figure out how many students lack devices. And the fact is, they're just throwing numbers out there because every time you get, they'll give us a number and they'll give us no sources for their data. And we've seen, what I've certainly seen, and we can all see it as it plays out in the media, that the current Minister of Education is very unwilling to consult and to speak with persons and to listen. So we get policies handed down but none of the key stakeholders speaking to the policy. So that's why you get a disparity in the figures. You get no idea as to what's the realities facing teachers and students. And I'll bring Principal, Vice Principal Jankie in here. And I just, as you look on, as a former educator, and I know once you've been an educator, you will always be an educator. Coming from a family with teachers myself, that never goes away. And what has it been like looking on at this landscape, looking on at not just the teachers just asking to be heard, asking for a voice, saying that no one has spoken to us with respect to this hybrid learning system. No one has asked us if the school is equipped, if the teachers are equipped, what it means for the curriculum. What has it been like for you as a person who's been in the system, who's been responsible for a high school, looking on right now at what is happening at this critical juncture? You'd have to unmute your mic, please.
Are you hearing me now? Okay. Well, as a former principal, teacher, dean of discipline, head of department in science, it is heartbreaking to see what is going on in education right now. And when I had to leave as acting principal in Preysal in 2010, remember the UNC administration had not really been in power at that time. So, but I followed their progress very closely, and I can tell you what Dr. Gopeesingh is saying about the data for the laptop distribution and so on is quite correct. We could have supplied that information not within a month, but within a week or two, because we had systems in place to ensure that we knew exactly the stats of all the students, their needs for school feeding, and their denominational backgrounds and so on, because I handle the CSO statistical reports personally for the school on an annual basis. And it is really heartbreaking to see what is going on with, as far as the lack of consultation with the people at the Ministry of Education. And it is painful to a certain extent, because even when I left and I was still in education with the NOST program, the NOST being the National Open School of Trinidad and Tobago, wherein teachers were given the opportunity to offer tuition free of charge to people who would have dropped out the system, so they could come back if they were working in a grocery or in a gas station and they did not get the appropriate grades to get a proper job. We would give them lessons free of charge under that NOST program. And that was starved of funding until it literally collapsed. As a matter of fact, we, the learner support officers and coordinators, would have serious problems to get our monies. And we did not mind, we soldiered on in the interest of the children. And the same thing happened with Dr. Gopeesingh's continuous assessment component program. He's probably aware of that. As a matter of fact, I don't know if he remembered, I met him one day in a store in Grand Bazaar and I told him, Doc, you know, we're not getting our money. And he said he will deal with those guys. And well, he demitted office. And unfortunately, some of the CSE monitors to this day, when this program was terminated, not through our fault, but through the Ministry of Education under Minister Garcia, pulled the plug on the program. Some of the monitors have died and they have not gotten their monies. Imagine that. And our termination letter was dated the 9th of September 2015. We are in October 2021. Can you imagine this? So this is just to show and illustrate how the Ministry of Education does things sometimes if they're under the wrong Minister of Education. So if you don't collaborate and talk with the stakeholders who are involved in education, you are going to run into problems. Hence the reason the laptop program flopped, right? And now, according to Dr. Gopeesingh, they are frantically trying to beg, cap in hand, for corporate sponsors to supply laptops to the students. And they also do things back to front. A lot of these schools don't have the equipment for internet service. A lot of these children don't have internet service in their homes. So they are at a disadvantage. And that should not be the case in 2021.
Can I just make a little intervention here, Anita?
Absolutely.
The issue of the continuous assessment component, which Principal Jankie is speaking about, is this came on after widespread consultation in Trinidad and Tobago. You see 24 people who aligned probably to the government writing and saying that we have to do away with the SEA and we have to do, but they have not put forward one iota of recommendation what you do if you remove the SEA. But this is not a program for that to talk about. But I deplore, I dislike what they have done, or what they put their heads together, the 24 of them, and just made a blanket statement that the SEA must be removed. But what are you going to substitute with? We had 2 national consultations extending over a 3 to 4 day period for each one of these. And we had 8 district consultations in each one of the educational districts in the first year of governance. And we had over 5,000 educators who participated in those discussions. And they recommended that we introduce morals, values, ethics, citizenry development, character development, physical education, visual and performing arts into the primary school situation, and even in the early childhood education system, starting then. They recommended that we have a continuous assessment component where we begin to check the students from standards 3, 4, and 5. So in our 3rd year, we implemented the marking system for students in standard 4. The next year, we did it for 4 and 5. And we were moving to ensure that the students were looked at from an early age where they would have been participating in the education program at a high level. The 2 students would have probably passed through that. I'm not sure about the age in relation to that. But that, Mr. Jankie, that continuous assessment component, part of it was the real solution to the whole concept of the one do and die examination. But within the first year, they removed that. They brought the exam back to March when we had the consultation said that we'll have the SEA examination in May, and so on. But there's so much to speak about. But in terms of one thing about the connectivity, during our time, each one of our secondary schools had connectivity, and the 300 primary schools, with the exception of 2 secondary schools out of 134, which were very remote. And we had connectivity to such an extent that we had some schools with 100 megabits per second. Some schools had about 40 megabits per second. Some had 10 megabits per second. And we were working with the providers of ICT, of telecommunications, Digicel, Flow, and TSTT for sure, and even Green Dot. And they helped us to provide this platform for the e-textbook learning and so on. But they ensured that there was widespread connectivity to all the schools, and we were working towards improving the connectivity. And why is it that it took 6 years, Dr. Rowley's government has not worked with the providers of telecommunication to ensure that communities have the connectivity that is required for the students who had difficulties in logging on many times? And why is it that the Ministry of Education did not meet these stakeholders and work with them as fast as possible to ensure that the connectivity is widespread across Trinidad and Tobago. And so we were very swift in ensuring that connectivity was there for each one of the schools. And we were moving towards each one of the classroom having Wi-Fi connectivity so that each one of the classes could have had their classes going on at the same time. Now, in terms of devices, they did not even have to have laptops. They could have provided other types, Android devices as well. So when the students spoke a while ago about the rush and the hectic issue and the lack of socialization, this government stands accused, Dr. Rowley's government, for dangerously ruining the education and the future lives of almost 250,000 students whom we have in schools at the moment. We have 5 years at about 18,000 per year, 90,000 in secondary school, and 8,000 in the advanced level. That's about close to 100,000 altogether. And in the primary school, 7 years at 18,000 is 126,000. So I'm sure the Ministry of Education, now the present minister, doesn't even know how many students and how many teachers she has, far less to understanding how many devices she needs, where they need the connectivity. So this has been a very incompetent, incapable government, which lacked any vision, and that has been existing under Dr. Rowley's administration for the last 6 years. Students, I empathize with you all. You're now being educated in a time when I have to say myself that the Ministry of Education is at a loss to know what is happening to you all. And I'm sure that you all can see it and understand it yourselves, that your parents have to be with you at home, you're struggling to get connectivity in your residence, and all because of the floundering. In terms of the meeting with stakeholders, Anita, I'm sure you know that there are about 18 denominational boards in Trinidad and Tobago who own and manage schools. You have the Parent Teachers Association, you have Tutor, you have the Association of Principals of Primary Schools, you have the Association of Principals of Secondary Schools, you have the Association of Principals of the schools for the specially challenged students, which we have about 25 in Trinidad and Tobago. So where has the consultation taken place? Where is the consultation with the providers of the internet connectivity and so on? So they have been sitting on their hands and just hoping that something will be solved.
Well, you know, it's a little more than sitting on their hands. I mean, last year we had the election in August, and students would have been getting their CSEC and CAPE results around September. And there was a very unfortunate incident where persons would have written exams and then gotten grades that did not correlate with their ordinary performance. I don't know if you all recall that. And I spent my entire first couple of months listening to heartbreaking stories from students who were not sure what happened because they were the first set that had to do the assessment during the pandemic. They had the weight of their papers changed at the last moment. And in that moment, I realized that the Ministry of Education had effectively locked all of them out of the conversation, because people were coming to us saying, well, what can we do? What can be done about our grades? And it's really terrible to look at persons who would have worked extremely hard and done all that they can do, and then because of the time that they wrote the exam, see grades fundamentally different from what they would have faced. And if we had continued with a continuous assessment program and over time relieve the burden of some of these examinations, you would have seen people getting fairer results over time. And I want to bring these students back in now, and I want to just for them to weigh in on so yes, you're in school right now and you're experiencing what it's like to be educated at this time. what would you like to see done? What would facilitate making your learning easier, making the learning environment more friendly? But more importantly, what would help you be not just productive, but be able to thrive in the environment that you will face when you come out into the world of work? I think we need to hear that from you so that we can make clear policy decisions going forward in terms of your needs. You can jump, any one of you can jump in.
Okay. Well, to make the whole system easier, shipping online. I know we already shipped online, but some people, they haven't even gotten online yet. And I think that they should set up something where students can have access to Wi-Fi devices, because not each and every single parent can afford these things, you know. And it's very saddening actually, because everyone deserves an education and that opportunity. And with this situation happening right now, that's kind of being taken away from them, and in a sense where, you know, they don't have internet connection or devices. And I believe all students should have access to laptops, and the government can help provide these laptops, because I know that under the Kamala Prasad regime, they gave out a lot of laptops during that time, and now that we actually need it, that we really do need it, we are not being given that. And I think they really do need to start back doing these things. I think it's really important, because a lot of children out there, they are missing out on great opportunities and on their education.
Yes, I totally agree with what Preity said, right? Education not only comes in the form of just a book and a pen and a teacher, it also regards with the social, mental, and emotional development of a student. And I think the government needs to make some more adjustments and improvements, certainly, because the government could start off by helping students by giving educational grants. And these grants could help students and by making them be able to quote and buy their books, right? Even though the educational system right now is online, they still need their textbooks, they still need notebooks, they still need stationery supplies, you know. And I think the government should really, really start giving out more devices, because I know a couple of friends, some of them, they do not have access to Wi-Fi. Some of them, they do not have devices, and it is heartbreaking, you know. Some of them are mentally challenged in terms of, I spoke to a student, she wanted to kill herself because she didn't have mental or emotional support at home. I actually had to counsel this student because my counselor at school was bombarded. This is a very technical situation for all, but the government really needs to have improvements made. And I think, you know, in this pandemic, the government should have a program to evaluate students who are in need, who are unfortunate. They need to have a program where they can be able to give these grants, maybe Amazon gift cards. They could give them, they could give them bookstore gift cards. They could give them these things that could allow them to purchase the necessities of this virtual online system. And I think that in addition to this, I would just like to say that we have resources in this country, but it is not being used efficiently. And I see this in all sectors, looking at what the government is doing. And there really needs to be improvement, because my heart goes out to all the students right now who doesn't have their support at home. They do not have their support coming from the government. They do not have support coming from their school, right? Because I could say my school is doing a really great job during this time. They are improvising. But what about the schools who are not using their resources, who have teachers who are getting underpaid and discouraged to go out to work? All of these problems contribute to what improvements need, of what kind of improvements need to be made, I should say. And, you know, I think education, again, is not only about a student learning, but it's also about their development, making sure that they are not in the wrong direction. but in the right direction. And I think really more improvements need to be made when it comes to this education system.
Absolutely. And Mr. Jankie, I know you would have been observing the situation, and as we approach another year, we would have seen this hybrid learning system not only being proposed, but they rolled it out, and you've heard the cries of the teachers. What are your thoughts on this hybrid learning system and this vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and the manner in which it was done? We could get your thoughts on that.
Okay, I just like to say that maybe the physical and virtual learning may have to be with us for some time yet until we get control over this COVID pandemic. However, I was talking to actually a niece of mine who is a qualified secondary school teacher, and she was telling me from her own experience, practical that is, the school that she's in cannot accommodate this hybrid teaching learning environment. They just don't have the facilities to accommodate teaching via the Zoom and the physical face-to-face treatment, you see. And that is the situation, I think, throughout the system, where they are saying that they want to do this and they want to do that, but they are not putting things in place. For example, a simple basic thing like are the classrooms properly sanitized? Is the environment properly secure to prevent further spread of the virus, for example? You see, so that is one of the pitfalls of this present system. So they have to come up with a better plan to ensure that the students do not lose out, because at the end of the day, the education of the children at this stage is very critical for where they end up in the next few years, you know. And going back a little bit to the CSE monitoring system, Dr. Gopeesingh is the minister who was in charge when they introduced that CSE monitoring system. And I could tell you, I was in that system. And from practical experience, I was worked not only in the St. George East District, but I was sent to Port of Spain, much to my dismay at first, because they said there was a shortage of male CSE monitors in Port of Spain. So I had to end up going there. And would you believe I went to some of the most press areas, schools, where I was actually afraid to go at first. And when I actually went in there and met some of those students and talked to the teachers, and I would go there every week because I never missed a day for any chance to slip away from doing the work. I was enjoying myself, monitoring the teachers and being the support officer on the side, the guide on the side, so to speak. And I will tell you something. In a particular school near Besson Street Police Station, which is regarded as a high-risk area, I remember going up the stairs with my briefcase to the classroom, and the little girls in that school, there was a girls and boys school actually adjacent to each other. The girls would run down the stairs to come and meet me and help me with my briefcase when I was coming up. And they would want me to be there with them during lunch hour to chat and talk and all this and talk about different topics like science and so on. And when the teacher was not there, I would prepare word salutes for them so that they would participate in all sorts of activities, whether it be science or geography or agriculture and so. And next door, the school next door, the boys' school, the teacher would call me and show me one day the enthusiasm that was clearly visible in the boys, who would often stay away for any spurious reason from class. He said, "So if you see these children now, they work as a team. They're very anxious to come to school. They come and say, 'So when are we going to water these plants? When are we going to fertilize the plants? When are we going to record our data?'" So they were into this thing with a certain amount of zeal that he never experienced before. So that was a very, very good initiative on the part of Minister Gopeesingh to introduce the CSE monitoring. And I was very happy to be part of that. And so it is, as Dr. Gopeesingh said, the last Prime Minister was really into human capital development. She was really about the student-centered learning. And this is where we have to focus if we are going to move forward in education, because as it is now, only the people in the so-called prestige schools can seem to benefit from this lopsided state of affairs.
I
Anita, just want to
Yes.
make a few comments here. Thank you, Principal Jankie. I think you touched on that, and the two students touched on two areas of concern. One is the question of the mental health aspect and students needing counseling, and the other is the textbook issue as well. In 2012, Prime Minister Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, instructed that we purchase textbooks for the students, for every child, in every form, in every school, in every subject, got a textbook for that particular subject. So if you had 10 subjects with needing textbooks, every child in every class had it. And she ensured that we purchased almost close to 2 million textbooks for students during our 5-year term of office. When they came into office, when Mr. Rowley's administration, Dr. Rowley's administration, not one textbook has been purchased over the last 5-6 years, as far as I understand. The mental health issue. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, as Prime Minister, told me, Tim, we need to increase the amount of student support services. The population must remember that Mrs. Bisesa was Minister of Education between 1997 to 2000. And between 97 and 2000. So she had a full understanding of what went on. And there were only about 300 student support services officers when we came into office. She ensured that she took it to about 700, where we began to bring in educational psychologists, behavioral psychologists, clinical psychologists, student support services. So we had a full complement, and they railroaded that and brought it back down to less than about 300, so that when students need some type of counseling and help, even though they're at home, these student support services officers would have been able to assist them on one-to-one dialogue over a period of time. And so this is another failure on the part of Dr. Rowley's administration. And it is important for us to just refresh the memories of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that Mrs. Bisesa, as Prime Minister, then ensured in the education that we had continuous teacher training and development, whole primary and secondary school curriculum reform. The ICT in the education was at its best. We had the children understanding and testing, neurodiagnostic testing of children. We had the organizational restructuring and transformation of the education system. Student support services were the best. Parenting and education workshops, emphasis on early childhood education, which we were complimented for being the first country in the world to have achieved that. We were filling vacancies of moderators, facilitators, as Principal Jankie mentioned, we had a great emphasis on textbook education, CVQ1 and CVQ2 being done in addition to all the academics. And we had, well, I'm not speaking infrastructure where we built those amount of school. We had leadership training. We ensured that all the teachers, a lot of teachers were trained in ICT. So we were a world leader in education between 2010 and 2015. Countries were asking us, what are we doing? I remember speaking with the Minister of Health, Minister of Education in Singapore, after I was minister for about 2 years, when he said on a newspaper in Singapore came out blaring that that morals, values, and ethics would be now taught in the schools in Singapore. We had already started that in Trinidad and Tobago. We are lauded at the Global Education Forum as being one of the leading countries in education. We were lauded by presidential candidate Mrs. Clinton for our reforms in education and our early childhood education. And the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, in a meeting in Barbados to Caribbean prime ministers, told Caribbean prime ministers that Trinidad and Tobago became the first country in the world to achieve universal early childhood education, where we are taking care of the 36,000 children aged 3 and 4. We had the best academic performance ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago in all 3 examinations, SEA, CSEC, and CAPE in 2014, and we bettered it in 2015. We had parenting and education workshops where parents came together with their children and assisted. So we had over 100,000 parents who became involved in their children's education. So we were on the move.
Correct.
But unfortunately, everything stopped when they came in. The 2 ministers for the 5 years made a mess of education. And this present minister, unfortunately, she hasn't been able to have a grasp of what is happening at the moment. So we're in a real terrible situation.
Correct. And you know what? When you talk about the fact that we had the best academic results over those years, it just goes to show you, once you have the correct inputs into the system, you will get the results. And our results are showing us right now that our students are simply not responding to the policies that would have been put in place, because we're getting, I think, a number of students who are 30% of students who are not making a passing grade in some of these areas. And that means something for us as a society, and it means something for what would happen to them as adults in the system, who, if they weren't able to cope within the education system.
Can I just take a pin for a minute on this? The SEA examination, when we came in 2010, 14% of the students out of who wrote, the 18,000 students who wrote, got less than 30%. In our 5 years, we brought it down to less than 1%. Within their first year of administration, 15 to 16, more than 13% of the students again failed to get more than 30%. And this tells you the incompetence of the government, the incompetence of Prime Minister Rowley, the incompetence of the ministers of education then, and unfortunately, the present Minister of Education, who is not listening to anybody.
And you know what this thing is, especially when we discuss the education sector, because we have discussions on politics across the board, but in particular in the education sector, you are talking about the lives of the next generation of Trinidadians and Tobagonians. You are literally talking about the future of our nation. And therefore, if you fumble the ball, if you are not able to do the right things now, our country will have a high price to pay in the future, because you are then trying to fix a problem that you created many years ago.
The destruction of education system now is not on because of the pandemic alone. You know?
No, absolutely not.
Started to occur from 2016 to now, when thousands of students, even before the pandemic, were unable to have a place in a school because the school infrastructure were bad and so on. And you know, we have enough teachers. We have 1 to 13 teachers in primary schools and about 1 to 12 in secondary schools. As Mr. Jankie said, Principal Jankie said, there's a paucity of men teachers. There's about 3 out of 10 men who are teachers, as far as I remember in 2015 when I donated office.
And you know,
So,
when we look at you know, as you're talking about the space and teachers, we also have a minister telling us that telling a number of students who would have trained to become teachers that there's no space for you. You know, but then I have schools telling me about vacancies, but I am hearing from a minister telling me that there is no space for you. Do not apply. Our door is closed. You know,
well,
I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
it seems as though the Ministry of Education has taken on the responsibility of the Teaching Service Commission, which is their responsibility. But in another discussion, we talk about the need for reform of all these the Police Service Commission, the Teaching Service Commission, the Police Public Service Commission, and the Judicial and Legal Service Commission. And these all 4 institutions are under serious pressure now because of political interference. And they're inefficient and they're not doing what is supposed. Imagine the Teaching Service Commission meets probably twice per month for a half-day period. And all the files are still manual files. So when you're looking for promotion and so on and vacancies, how can they effectively function? It's a disgrace that these institutions are allowed to continue in the same format. Either you have them full-time with full employment and digitalize the information for all the teachers and the students in a rapid manner, and so that you could move progressively. The same thing with the Judicial and Legal Service Commission, the same thing with the Police Service Commission and the Public Service Commission, which say that they don't have enough of employees in the Public Service Commission, and so they can't function as effectively as they need to. So all these joint select committees of Parliament, all these information came to hand. And what has Dr. Rowley done over the 6 years, but try to destroy these independent institutions to suit himself to what is happening today. And you see it very evident. This is unacceptable. It is deplorable. The whole autocratic management interfering with the independence of these institutions could no longer continue. And he has to hold himself in shame for this.
Absolutely, absolutely. As I bring our conversation here tonight to a close, I want to afford each person the opportunity to give some closing remarks. And if you'd give some thoughts in your closing remarks to letting us know, or giving especially the students on our panel a little hope for the future, because I mean, you and I know what the situation is like right now, Dr. Gopeesingh, and I know that we remain committed to developing plans and policies for the future. We intend, I know, once returning to office, to return to our successful policies. But in the meanwhile, as students contend with the pandemic, with the struggles of an education sector that has genuinely collapsed in the past few years, I think it is the onus on us right now to still, you know, as we close, give them a little pat on the back to go forward with, you know,
Well,
a little.
Yeah, we want to congratulate the 2 students who spoke out openly.
Yeah.
We empathize with your difficulties. We have been speaking about the experiences of your difficulties. We want to continue, as Ms. Haynes is the Shadow Minister of Education from the party, and she can hold the government accountable on education issues. Let your parents speak to the associations in the school, the Parent Teachers Association. Let them speak with the principal, the school supervisors, bring your issues to them. And I'm sure we as a party, the United National Congress, as a government in waiting, we would continue with Anita Haynes there and the rest of the team of people to assist you all. We will continue to implore for better facilities for you all, for your devices, for better connectivity, for your teachers to be present with you all, and to ensure that you receive the best education that you deserve and which is constitutionally enshrined. And we will do all for you all, because you are the future. You are taking over from us. You will be leading this country in the future, and we do not want your education to be compromised. We will do everything in our power. Ms. Haynes is there. I, as a former minister who is quite senior now, will do, with my experience, will give her all the help that she needs, and will continue to give our party, the alternate government, all the assistance in promulgating the policies and programs to ensure that education remains at the forefront, and for people-centered development to be at the forefront, and human capital development. Because if we do not develop your skills and talents and abilities, where are we going as a country? You have to have the leading positions. We are with you. And God bless you all, and continue to receive your education to the best ability in these trying and difficult times. And be your brother's keeper and your colleagues' keepers. Talk to them and ensure you keep on motivating them all along, because you all are in it together. And your friendship, even though you're virtual, will continue. And one day you will meet each other in person, and you will be able to hug each other again. God bless you all. And Principal, thank you for your words of experience and history from the past. Thank you, Anita.
You're welcome, Dr. Gopeesingh. Principal Jankie, your closing remarks.
Okay, I would just like to say to the girls that we continue to pray for you and for all the students throughout our beloved country. Those of us who have education at heart, and I come from a family where my father was a headmaster. My sister was a teacher before she became a lawyer. My uncles were teachers and principals, and my cousins were also teachers before they became doctors and lecturers and so on. So I can tell you that you must keep the faith. Soon, hopefully, we pray that the pandemic will be over and things will return to some form of normalcy. But you have to keep your eyes on the goal. You are there to further your education at whatever cost. And we know the situation is grim out there with the lack of support from whence it should come. But as the other speakers said, hope is on the horizon. So you have to keep the faith and be resilient. And sometime soon you will be able to meet with your friends again and have that physical learning and face-to-face meetings with your teachers, and you will get through this. But this is very important to you all. So you have to be resilient. Do not lose faith, and things will be okay in the near future.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Preity, Sadah, I'm turning over to you now, but I want to take this opportunity to commend you for having your voice heard on a panel. I can imagine things like this could be very intimidating for persons, especially when we are younger and in younger spaces. And I have used my time in the political arena to just encourage as many younger persons as possible to amplify your voices and make sure that you're heard, because you are agents, important agents in decision making. Your voice must carry weight, because you will bear the weight of the decisions being made now longer than any of us. And so allow me to congratulate you for taking an opportunity when it was presented to you, and then doing so absolutely well, articulating your positions, articulating what you are facing, And I want to encourage you absolutely to continue to do so. Wherever life may take you, just remember your voice is important, and there is always a space for your voice to be heard. So I want to hear your closing remarks. I want to hear what the experience was like. And before I turn over to Kirk. So jump in, feel free to jump in, either one of you at any point in time.
Well, thank you for your kind words. This was kind of nerve-wracking, but it was good overall. And one point I forgot was the GATE program. I really hope they bring that back because a lot of people can't afford it. But thank you. I'll turn it over to Sadah.
Hi, good night again. I would just like to take this opportunity to say thank you all very much for this platform where our voices as the youth of Trinidad and Tobago could be heard. This is a very insightful meeting we had together, and I would just like to say that we need more opportunities like this in the country for our youth because our voices matter. And I just want to say that I am aspiring to be the future Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And I would really love to serve the people. So this has been a tremendous experience for me. So thank you all. Have a blessed night.
All right. Well, thank you again. And, aside from being the Shadow Minister of Education, I have always benefited from mentorship within the party. Dr. Gopeesingh knows I call on him, and I can call on him for any assistance at any point in time. And because of my experience, yes, and because of my experience, I have decided to do a mentorship program out of my office for young persons who are interested in politics, to kind of shadow for a day what an MP and what the job of an MP is look like. So you can look towards my Facebook pages and my Instagram pages as we roll that out. So that would be of interest to you, because it's very difficult to figure out what you want to do with your life. And then once you figure that out, it's very difficult to figure out how to get there. And so I think we all have a space to make that easier. Kirk, once again, I want to thank you. I want to thank the checklist. I want to thank the leadership of the United National Congress for continuing to give a voice to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, to ventilate issues, to ventilate policies, to have productive conversations. I think that is far too absent in our society right now. And we are facing trying times, but we have the human capital, we have the capacity to fix the problems that are facing Trinidad and Tobago, but only if we engage in a sensible manner. And platforms such as this give a wide variety of persons an opportunity to participate in a conversation on national development. So Kirk, thank you again, and over to you now.
Well, thank you very much, Anita. You did a great job. This was all the panelists did really well. You guided the discussions brilliantly. Dr. Gopeesingh, your contribution was so valuable, and your words of advice to the students and encouragement was also very touching. Also, Principal Jankie as well, your advice and words to the students and your own history is very, very informative. And both Preity and Sadah, you all were great. You said you were nervous. You didn't seem nervous. It was really good, and I'll look out for you in the future with your aspirations there. All the best. That's great. Just as MP Haynes is a successor to former Minister Gopeesingh in terms of education, I am the successor PRO. She was PRO before me, and so we keep handing on over, and you all are the young people, Preity and Sadah, and we will have to hand off to you at some point as well. So, and as Dr. Gopeesingh said, your education is extremely important, and we value that very, very highly in the UNC. And so I want to thank all our viewers as well online. I hope you found this as informative as as I did, and I'm sure all the panelists did as well. There was just incredible, important information there. Thank you very much, and we will continue our discussions every month. And I want you to look out for issue 4 of the checklist, which will be coming out right after this. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for participating. This was a great, great success. Thank you and good night.